do we attach such value to material things, seeing that we have been taught to despise them? Why do we cling to money and possessions and disperse our intellect among a host of useless cares? Our preoccupation with such things diverts us from what is more important and makes us neglect the well-being of our soul, leading us to perdition. For we, who profess to be philosophers and pride ourselves on being superior to pleasure, are seen to pursue material gain with more zest than anyone else. Nothing brings such severe punishment on us as our persuasion of others to imitate our own evil ways. Let no one despise these words. Either correct your evil conduct, which brings disgrace upon the divine philosophy, leading others to indifference, or else give up all claim to be a philosopher. For the true philosopher, possessions are superfluous, since he detaches himself from bodily concerns for the sake of the soul's purity. If your aim is material riches and pleasure, why pretend to honor philosophy while you act in a manner which entirely conflicts with it, cloaking your conduct under fine words? So great is our preoccupation with material things that we feel no shame when, on breaking the Saviour's commandments, we are rebuked even by those whom we despise because they still live in the world, for they now teach us instead of us teaching them. When we are quarreling, they remind us that the servant of Christ must not engage in strife, but be gentle to all men. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 24. When we are disputing about money and possessions, they quote to us the text, "If anyone takes away your coat, let him have your cloak also." Matthew chapter 5, verse 40. They ridicule and deride us because of the incongruity between our actions and our vocation. Indeed, is it ever right to engage in disputes in order to protect our property? Suppose that someone destroys the boundary of our vineyard and adds it to his own land. Someone else lets his animal loose in it, and someone else diverts the water supply from our garden. Must we then lose all self-control in such situations and become worse than madmen? But in that case, our intellect, which should be engaged in the contemplation of created beings, must now give its attention to lawsuits, turning its contemplative power to worldly cunning, so as to defend a quantity of unnecessary possessions. Why do we try to make other people's properties our own, weighing ourselves down with material fetters, and paying no attention to the prophet's imprecation? Woe to him who gathers what is not his own, and heavily loads his yoke. Those who pursue us are, as Jeremiah says, swifter than the eagles of heaven. Lamentations chapter 4, verse 19. But we weigh ourselves down with worldly things, move slowly along the road, and so are easily overtaken by our pursuer, covetousness, which Paul taught us to flee. Galatians chapter 3, verse 5. Even if we are not heavily laden, we must still run as fast as we can, or else the enemy will overtake us. Attachment to worldly things is a grave obstacle to those who are striving after holiness, and often brings ruin to both soul and body. For what destroyed Naboth the Israelite? Was not his vineyard the cause of his death, because it roused the jealousy of his neighbor Ahab? 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 1 through 16. What made the 2.5 tribes stay outside the promised land but their huge herds and flocks? Numbers chapter 34, verse 15. What divided Lot and Abraham? Was it not also their huge herds and flocks which caused continual quarrels among the herdsmen, and in the end forced them to part? Genesis chapter 13, verse 5 through 11. So possessions arouse feelings of jealousy against their owners, cut off their owners from men better than themselves, divide families, and make friends hate one another. Possessions, moreover, have no place in the life to come, and even in this present life have no great use. Why then do we abandon the service of God and devote ourselves entirely to empty trivialities? For it is God who supplies us with all that we need. Human efforts inevitably fail unless God helps us, while God in His providence bestows every blessing without man's assistance. What benefits were gained from their efforts by those to whom God said, "You sowed much and gathered little, and I blew it away out of your hands"? And what did the righteous lack, though they gave no thought at all for their needs? Were not the Israelites fed in the desert for 40 years without cultivating the land? They always had enough to eat, for in a strange and miraculous way, quails came in from the sea, and manna fell from the sky. Exodus chapter 16, and a dry rock, when struck, gushed water. Exodus chapter 17, verse 6. And throughout the whole 40 years, their clothes and shoes never wore out. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 4. What land was tilled beside the brook, Cherith, where Elijah hid? Did not the ravens bring him food? 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 6. And when he came to Sarepta, did not the widow, despite her desperate need, give him bread, snatching it from the mouth of her own children? 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 10 through 16. All this shows that we should seek holiness, not clothing, food, and drink.